Good afternoon. I'm Senator Gary Daniels from District 11. Today we'll be holding a meeting of the Senate Finance Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and/or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are any problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states his or her presence, please also state where you are and if anyone is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. We'll start with Senator Rosenwald.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Cindy Rosenwald from Nashua, District 13. I'm in the Senate chamber.
Senator Gaida,
Senator Bob Gaida, District 2, President of the Senate Chamber.
Senator Reagan, Senator D'Alessandro, Senator Hennessy,
Good afternoon, Aaron Hennessy from Littleton in the Senate chamber.
Senator Morse,
Senator Chuck Morris, President of the Senate Chamber.
and I'm Senator Gary Daniels from District 11, and I am also in the Senate chambers. And I would now invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first presentation this afternoon is with the Veterans Home. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chair Daniels, how are you today?
Doing well, and yourself?
Very good, thank you. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present our fiscal year 22 and 23 budget needs of the New Hampshire Veterans Home to you. Sir, did you want me to share my screen or does your admin have the presentation?
We do have presentations before us. Does anyone want the screen shared or easier just to follow along in the packets? Okay, I guess we're good with the packets.
Wonderful. So as you know, the New Hampshire Veterans Home was established under RSA 119 and is a 250-bed facility that is supported by 3 different revenue sources. Today, we are caring for 96 of our veterans, that is 88 men and 8 women. The average age of those are 83.11 or 83 years old, really. The age range, and this is additional information I just thought you might want. It's not in the presentation. Our youngest veteran is 61 and our oldest veteran is 99 years old. Qualified staffing, if you go to the 3rd page, is particularly in nursing. continues to be a challenge to recruit and retain. Again, our vacancies remain that we continue to strive to fill. Currently, we have many LNA positions, RN positions that we're actively recruiting for. Of course, VA regulations as well as state regulations require that we have qualified nursing staff available on a daily basis to meet the needs in an environment that promotes the residents' physical, mental, and psychological well-being and enhances the quality of care and the quality of life. If we go to the next page, and I apologize, I left out the word revenue. Two of the revenue sources at the New Hampshire Veterans Home solely dependent on resident census. And that is the federal revenue that we receive for per diem, and that information is there. As well as agency income is based on, that's our room and board that we charge to our residents. And there is detailed information there in regards to how we charge them through our administrative rules. Those two reasons are reasons for the footnotes that we've requested in the budget. And again, the next page starts the budget. Now this is the House version of the budget, so I'm hoping that that's what you would like me to speak to. And it starts on page 644, but I do have it in the presentation. Our budget starts about halfway down page 644.
Okay, and actually, we'll be working off the compare budget,
Oh, I apologize.
which is on page 13.8. I'm getting feedback on something. Josh, I don't know.
That's 1380. And I apologize, sir.
Okay,
I do have 1380 in front of me, and I do apologize. I thought you wanted the House budget in there. We were very fortunate through the House that we had no changes. There was no differences between what we requested from the governor and what was approved through the House. We start on 1380, which talks about the custodial care of, and those are positions like maintenance, dietary, laundry, housekeeping. There are approximately 94 positions in those lines. Are there any specific lines you'd like me to speak to, sir?
nothing in particular.
We adhered to the governor's request and only asked for a very small marginal increase over our actual budget of fiscal year 2020. Do you want me to just continue on to professional services, sir?
Yes, please.
Next page, 1381, again, professional services. Those are our nursing as well as social workers and the like recreational staff. There's approximately 289 full-time equivalents in that budget. Again, very small increases. As you can see, we do have medical payments to providers in the last line 101, and that is our contractual agreement that we are able to get LNAs and RNs through an agency as needed. And again, no big jumps on any of those compared to the fiscal 2020 actual. Again, the federal funds, as you can see listed, as well as agency income, helps to support the professional care that is provided to our residents. And again, that is why the request for the the footnote that you see on page 1382, that speaks to the appropriation remaining in full and intact. If you go to page 1383, those are the prescription drug expenses for our residents here at the home. The small line of federal funds there is for drugs that are able to be reimbursed through the VA sharing agreement. that the New Hampshire Veterans Home and the VA has in regards to drugs that are directly related to service-connected disabilities. If we go to 1384, that is workers' comp. Again, 100% general fund is funded as well as very flatlined. If you go to page 1385, it speaks to the unemployment compensation. Again, minimal amounts there. And that brings us on page 1386 to the end of our budget. If you return to my handout, you will see that I talk about some of the needs in the next 2 fiscal years, of course, is equipment, new and replacement equipment, beds, overhead lifts. That just speaks to some of the equipment lines. And we recognize that additional challenges in women's health, bariatric care, hospice care, dementia with behavioral disturbances, as well as the specialized care of our Vietnam veterans will need to be addressed. The New Hampshire Veterans Home has a tradition of providing high quality, cost-effective operations to the disabled and elderly veterans in our state of New Hampshire. And we appreciate the continued support of Governor Sununu, and we hope for the support of this committee in order to continue that tradition. The next pages are just some pages that show some of our residents doing different activities around the home that I thought you might be interested in. And that, sir, concludes my presentation. And I thank you very much for allowing me to present.
Thank you, Commandant. Other questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 questions, if I could. Commandant, I noticed that the pharmacy line is down versus this year. I'm wondering if that is because your census has decreased.
Yes, the
It's on page 1383.
yes, 1383. And as you can see, we really, with our census being down, we do not anticipate the amount that we had originally requested for in the beginning. As you can see, if you look at 2021, the amount was higher, but the actual amount expended in fiscal year 20 was just under 600,000. So we wanted to trim that down. We were very fortunate. We are in the VA formulary. And so we get a really good cost per pharmaceutical.
And
Follow up?
thank you. So if the census is down, which we understand, and I noticed that your 2 census-based revenues are pretty stable or even slightly increased. Are you basing that on the full 250 bed thing, or is this based on an actual census that you're currently running?
Ma'am, Representative, that is, or I'm sorry, Senator, that is based on a projected budget census of 225. Currently, we have 96 residents today, but we do have 20 waiting to get into the Tar and Welch side of the home. We have 13 waiting to get into the Life Enhancement Dementia Unit. We have started admissions, so our census is actively increasing, and we do have 72 active applications. So we anticipate that we'll be able to crank those census numbers up.
Just one quick
Follow-up.
follow-up, if I could. When do you expect to be able to expand your census back to 225?
Again, we've started about a month ago doing admissions. We average 2 to 3 admissions a week. So it will take us
Thank you.
a while. Yep.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commandant, it's good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for what you do. I'm looking on page 1381, line 60, benefits, which is basically up 50% from 20 to 22, Governor and House.
Sure. Those benefits are directly related to positions being filled, sir. And so if with a certain, family plus one, or so if we have a lot of staff members that come in that are singles, then those monies do not get utilized and lapse back to the general fund.
Follow up?
They're based on a calculation done by the Division of Administrative Services.
Thank you. Follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peg, a couple years ago, there was a problem with a differential for night pay that was precluding you from hiring sufficient LNAs, nurses to staff the hospital to its full capacity. Is that problem still existent?
Yes, sir.
Now, do I understand that that is a result of contract negotiations?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Commandant.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
You as well.
Next presentation is on military affairs and veterans services.
Hey, sir, can you hear me okay?
I can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You want me to, are we ready?
You may start anytime you wish, sir.
All right, so hopefully you all have a 5-page handout, and the handout should just be titled State of New Hampshire Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. So for the record, I'm Major General David Michaelitis, the Adjutant General for the DMAS and New Hampshire National Guard. Next page, page 2. Hopefully you're looking at an organizational chart of our department. You can see the mission statement for the Army and Air National Guard and the Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. Just to give you sort of broad context and overview, we have approximately 1,700 soldiers in the Army National Guard and approximately 1,100 airmen at the Pease Air National Guard base, to include 166 state employees that support both that military affairs component, the New Hampshire National Guard, as well as veteran services. When you look at our organization chart, you'll see the 3 primary functions that we have for veteran services: the Veteran Cemetery, the Division of Veteran Services, and the New Hampshire Division of Community-Based Military Programs. So our state business office supports both entities, the military affairs and National Guard, as well as those 3 different components to the veteran services. Next slide, page 3. That should mirror page 258, which goes through FY20 actual, FY21 adjusted authorized, and our proposed budgets for 22 and 23 are requests. When you look at the bottom of page 3, it should say summary of changes. The first change I'd like to say is between FY20 actual and FY21 adjusted authorized. You'll see a difference. For example, federal funds, 20 million in FY20 actual, up to 30 million FY21 adjusted authorized. The reason why is rather simple. It's COVID. Between the state hiring freeze and freeze on construction, that's why FY20 actual looks lower than it typically would have been. After taking the governor's budget and his reductions into effect, you'll see the changes below on page 3, and they're rather simple. We have 4 positions that we changed, having a state match, a state general cost share to 100% federal. But I really like to highlight is summary of changes, paragraph number 2, where it says 7 new positions. If we go line by line, you'll see that the top 4 positions says clerk of the works, accountant 1, technical support specialist, and maintenance mechanic. Bottom line is that supports our infrastructure, our existing armories, and our construction budgets that are typically a majority of it federally funded. the bottom three positions, Grants Program Coordinator, Program Specialist 2, Program Specialist 2, those three positions are 100% state general funded and have to do with the Veterans Bill of Rights that was passed in the legislative session. Our fiscal note said we need those three positions. And once those become effective, the funding of those positions, we can then incorporate and handle and accommodate that Veteran Bill of Rights. Paragraph 3 says increasing utility funds. And paragraph 4 says DOIT, Department of Information Technology. Bottom line is we're building new buildings. We have a new Pembroke Armory. And we're going in partnership with the Department of Safety to building a new state police hangar with an additional hangar for our helicopters that go over there, so that it anticipated existing and future utilities costs is driving additional funding for those programs. And as you know, Department of Information Technology does our IT support on the state side for 166 state employees. And we send them a little bit of money every year so they can monitor our infrastructure for our internet. Slide 4 is just a bar chart that tells you the general funds versus federal funds. And the only thing I should have alluded to earlier is when you see other funds, those other funds are a function of two things: either small rental fees from renting out our armories, or the dependent burial fees that we get from dependents at the veteran cemetery. That's why we have a very small, when it says other rental and veteran cemetery fees. But as you can see, a majority of our funds are federally funded with a small cost share for state general funds. You can see the breakout in the pie chart of the uses of our funds for FY22. And you can also see the number of full-time equivalent employees for our state employees. So a rather lean state department. DVS, Division of Veteran Services, our veteran service officers run by Bill Gaudreau. The 5 positions, community-based military programs. There are currently 2, plus those 3 additional positions that we need funded for the Veteran Bill of Rights. And then obviously 9 positions at our veteran cemetery. And then finally on page 5, it says House Amendment changes. The first one alludes to the fact that in House Bill 2, we're initially given a $1.5 million of funds to do infrastructure improvements for veteran service organizations, as well as stipulation of additional sort of needs or services for our outreach for our veterans. We can accommodate the support for veterans' mental health and social isolation with our current assets, with the personnel we have in-house. And the last thing I'd just like to highlight is on page 5, where it says Section 12 of Senate Bill 143. The biggest strategic challenge for our organization is to get the next greatest generation of service members to join. So we propose a legislative change to what used to be called our New Hampshire National Guard Scholarship Fund that we retitled to become the New Hampshire National Guard Enlistment Incentive Program, which offers a small $500 incentive for any current guardsman of the junior ranks or retiree to get us a referral to get someone to join the National Guard. The only thing we did not do is, by the time we filed that legislation, is the scholarship fund was typically funded at $25,000 a year. It went to 0, and when we did this legislative change, we did not put an appropriation in that account. It's pretty much straightforward, and so, sir, subject to your questions, that's really all I have.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, it's good to see you today.
You too, sir.
Can you comment on the manning levels of our state guard unit with respect to what we'd like to have as opposed to what we do have?
Yes. The Air National Guard is 100% fully manned. The number is about 1096, so I just round out to 1100. The Army National Guard we're at 97% manned. We have about 1630 out of an adjusted end strength of 1683. The challenge that we have is every year we need to recruit an additional 240 soldiers into our formation to just cover our losses. So we have a gap of about 3 to 4% of current vacancies, but their turnover for enlistments, a soldier, when he typically joins for 6 years. They usually join to get the college benefits, and then they get out after a 6-year obligation. And that's the challenge is we've become almost a referral business. So just whatever we can do for enticement to get the next greatest generation to join, we need to try.
Follow up?
Can you give us an assessment of the current generation, if you will, of high school graduates that are the pool from which you would recruit, their willingness to serve? Are you seeing any decline with respect to past years, or can you comment on that?
Yes. The people who do join are exceptional. And I think it's indicative from all of you probably seeing at our fixed vaccination sites throughout the states, our junior enlisted soldiers, they've risen to the occasion. The challenge is the pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Only 29% of today's youth is eligible for military service. And that fishbowl gets smaller and smaller. Primarily childhood obesity, ADHD medications, high school degree, potentially a criminal record, marijuana. The constraints are significant. So only 29% of today's youth is eligible for military service. And that is our biggest challenge.
Thank you, sir.
Further questions? General, is there any incentive that is given for reenlistment?
So there is. So whether it's maybe recruiting off the street or 6-year like reenlistment, we will typically have our recruiting will have specific bonuses for specific specialties that we're having a difficulty trying to fulfill. So they exist at either the enlistment or the 6-year retention. Typically like our challenges say field artillery. We're predominantly field artillery state. Like working our HIMARS, our rocket launchers, it's sometimes a challenge because some of today's youth don't see that how does that skill transfer to the civilian sector, like being a military police or cyber, or some of those transferable skills where it's easily identifiable.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Have a good afternoon. And do we have the Department of Transportation? Bill Cass, are there others that are going to be joining you for the presentation in transportation? Yeah, you're muted right now. Okay. Committee will be in recess for 5 minutes. Bill, will there be others joining you in the presentation?
Yes, just give us 1 minute. Commissioner Sheehan and Director of Finance, Marie Mullen. I apologize. I was monitoring on my phone when I saw it switch over, so just give
Yeah,
one.
we're a little bit ahead of time, but we're in a 5-minute recess right now.
Okay, perfect, good.
Thank
Thank
you.
Yeah, and Commissioner Sheehan is on. She just needs to be promoted, as well as, I don't know if Marie is on. Because who's going to share? Are you or Marie? Marie, yeah. Oh, there's Marie. Oh, there we go. Perfect. We jumped on quick. They said they're in a 5-minute recess, Marie, and then they'll be right back to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, committee will come to order and the chair will recognize the Department of Transportation. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marie Mullen, the Director of Finance for New Hampshire DOT. And I believe Bill and the Commissioner on. I don't know if they want to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Victoria Sheehan, Commissioner for DOT.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
And I'm Bill Cass, the Assistant Commissioner for the DOT. Thank you for having us.
Good afternoon, Bill. And Maria, are you doing the presentation or who's?
It will be a combination.
Okay,
Commissioner will be starting first and then I'll take over later on.
okay, we'll recognize the Commissioner.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate this opportunity to talk about the 22-23 budget for the Department of Transportation. In preparation for today, we did send out our presentation materials, but we also provide the committee with a copy of our budget book. This is a pretty lengthy document that we send to you electronically. We'd be happy to provide hard copies if necessary, but it's essentially our annual report that we're required to produce by statute with some of the budget information added to the report. So that provides you with a detailed breakdown for every bureau and area of the department, and what we do, the level of productivity you could expect based on prior levels of investment, as well as the number of employees and the budget detail. So if you have any questions about the different bureaus and functions, we'd be happy to handle those today. But for our presentation, we focus really on the financial details. So with that, Marie, we'll start the slides. Can you advance the slides?
Yeah, someone had paused my screen sharing. I don't know. Should I stop and start it again? I had shared it before, but let me start. Okay, I should be live.
There you go.
Just a reminder of who we are at DOT and our mission. And so it's providing transportation excellence, enhancing the quality of life in New Hampshire. And, you know, we really take great pride in the work that we do at DOT. We're striving to provide a well-maintained, efficient, reliable transportation network. Why? Because it's so critical to our economy. So today you'll hear a lot about our operating budget, but we'll also be prepared to answer any questions that you might have about projects that are programmed through the 10-year plan, since those dollars do flow through our budget as well. Just a recap of how we're structured for any of the new committee members. So we actually have 3 commissioners. There's myself, Assistant Commissioner Bill Cass, who's also on with us today. As Assistant Commissioner, he serves as the Chief Engineer and oversees all things highway. And then we currently have a vacancy. Our Deputy Commissioner, Chris Wozchuk, just recently retired, but the Deputy Commissioner oversees the 3 divisions of Finance, Policy Administration, and Aeronautics, Rail and Transit. While our org chart looks very formal with a typical chain of command, we're a very flat organization. So for example, some of the bureaus under project development support the entire department, whether that's the Bureau of Right-of-Way or the Bureau of Environment, providing technical expertise to all the different areas. And perhaps it's the most important slide. Should you have questions about the budget or questions about the department, please feel free to reach out to any of us. In addition to the 3 commissioners, we have 5 directors, 1 for each division, and Marie Mullen serves as our Director of Finance. So to give you a sense of how our budget breaks down, for the returning members, you'll recall that we often divide our budget into the 2 sections. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very robust construction program, and we also provide financial assistance to cities and towns. And all of that work is programmed and prioritized through the 10-year plan process. So that's the municipal aid and construction portion of our budget. The slide shows you the split back in 2020 with about 420 million going to municipal aid and construction, and then 262 million was budgeted in true operating. And we're a complicated department because of the various sources of funding. So we're funded with highway funds or state revenue, federal funds, turnpike dollars, which can only be spent on the turnpike system, as well as revenue from some other fees, as well as the general fund. And this chart just gives you a sense of how the size of the department has changed over time. We currently have 1,650 full-time positions at DOT. In addition to our full-time workforce, we also have a number of part-time employees, especially in bureaus like turnpikes, where we have a lot of part-time toll attendants that we employ. And then we also are very reliant on seasonal help, both in the winter months and then in the summertime during the construction season. But you'll see that over the years, we have seen a reduction in the number of funded positions. Some of this is due to us embracing technology and be able to do things more efficiently. In other areas, it was contracting due to limited revenue. And so what is in the budget before you? So this particular slide at a very high level shows you what is currently in the House approved budget for 22 and 23. It's around 674 million in spending for fiscal year 2020 and 680 million for fiscal year 2023. The split, once again, we show that a significant portion of the money is the spending associated with projects programmed in the 10-year plan. And then our presentation today really focuses on the operating expenses that are prioritized through the budget process. And before we dive into all the details, and Maria will walk you through the different aspects of our budget, this chart just shows you our 2020 actuals, our 21 adjusted authorized budget, and then how the budget has evolved through each of the phases, from the agency phase to the governor's phase to then most recently the House phase. One of the things we'll talk about in a few minutes is the biggest change was really back in December, Congress passed what we refer to as CRISA, one of the relief bills. And through that particular piece of legislation, DOT received 41 million to account for lost revenue. And so that was really the biggest change between the agency phase and the governor's phase, was we increased the portion of our work that's funded with federal dollars, drawing on that 41 million, and reduced the draw on the highway fund. So this gives you a sense of how things changed at each phase. Our intent was to use all of the federal funds in the first year of the biennium because those were relief dollars. And so that's where that money was directed. But I'll turn it over to Marie and she'll do the deeper dive so you can understand exactly what happened in each phase and what services we're funding. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll touch on this just briefly. So I mentioned the 41 million in federal relief. In the House phase, while this was not included in HB1, in HB2, based on our testimony and the reduction in revenues in a number of areas, the House included language that provided 19 million in general funds to supplement the highway fund spending. So in the governor's phase, there was some additional general funds provided to DOT. And then further to that, the House approved 19 million. The areas that they directed it to, first of all, they put 4 million towards block grant aid. Block grant aid is the assistance that we provide to cities and towns. Cities and towns receive 12% of all the revenue that's collected. And so with our revenues being lower during the COVID-19 pandemic, the House felt it was important to supplement block grant to make sure that cities and towns got an amount in 22 and 23 that was closer to what they would have received pre-pandemic. Likewise, our betterment program was impacted, and so they chose to provide 5 million. And then the other items that had been reduced significantly in our agency phase budget were equipment and winter maintenance, and they did provide additional assistance for those items as well. So overall, with these modifications, we felt very happy with the proposal that was delivered from the House to the Senate for your consideration with respect to DOT items and meeting our highest priority needs. But with that, I'll turn it over to Marie now for the deeper dive.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm just going to go through the various funds in the DOT. So first area is our general funds. The general funds at DOT are very minor part of our budget. As you saw, we were over 600 million. We have about 1.5 to 1.6 million in this budget each year that is general funded. The general funds primarily fund our aeronautics and railroad bureaus. The Transit Bureau has a small portion, about $200,000 per year of general funds, and that was to assist the transit operators with their federal match. So that was something that was provided in the fiscal year 2021 budget, and the governor included and has continued into the FY22 and 23 budget. The governor did provide funding for one of our additional needs for the aeronautics principal planner position for the drone program. That was part of our FY 2021 budget again. But with the reduction in revenues initially, we had to make cuts, and the governor felt that this was important and had added it into our budget. There was a House change related to some additional federal funds we received for the CRISA Act, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. That was the one from December. So once we understood the amount of funds that FTA was providing, and this is a pass through to the transit operators for operations and maintenance, cleaning and those type of things, and for lost revenue, we included that in FY22 of the budget. So the House did make that change and increased the federal funds in the FY22 budget for transit so that those would be provided. Next, we'll talk about the Turnpike System. So the Turnpike System is an enterprise fund. As the commissioner said, all Turnpike revenue must be used on the Turnpike System. We cannot use Turnpike revenue to fund other state roads or throughout the state or other organizations. And likewise, we cannot use the gas tax or road toll on the Turnpike System, and nor are federal funds used on the Turnpike System. So because we collect the tolls, there are specific rules around this, and those funds can only be used on the Turnpike System. And again, the gas tax cannot be used on the Turnpike System because it's a separate user fee system. The way the Turnpike System is, because we have bonds, we are required to pay our operating and maintenance costs first, our debt service, and then our R&R work, which is our renewal and replacement work on the roads that already exist within the Turnpike System. Once all of those needs have been taken care of, then any excess revenue can go towards capital improvements for expansion, capacity expansion, or safety improvements, that type of thing. And just
could you just take a moment to explain to anyone who may be watching the difference between the Turnpike System and the highway system?
Yes, so the Turnpike System is primarily these three segments here on the map. So it's the Central Turnpike here from Concord and exit 14 all the way down to the Massachusetts border in Nashua. It's I-95 over on the seacoast, which is from the border of Massachusetts up through the border of Maine. And then the Spalding Turnpike up here, which is from around the Portsmouth traffic circle up through, I believe, exit 16 up on the Spalding Turnpike section. And so, yeah, and so it's those roads only that are part of the Turnpike System. So the revenue provided by the tolls can only be used to repair, like I said, capital projects or operate and maintain those roads specifically.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So just taking a quick look at the Turnpike Fund historical revenue, you know, prior to COVID, we were seeing, you know, modest increases of traffic on the Turnpike System. We were seeing some increases in revenue. And then when COVID hit, and I'll show you a minute of the traffic transactions, we had significant losses in revenue due to the reduced traffic on the Turnpike System. And so we're projecting to start to see some of that increase and come back in the next budget, but don't anticipate to be back at the same levels of 2019 for several years. And we'll get into that in a moment. So this slide here shows the traffic impacts that we've seen on really the system as a whole. We've kind of seen much of this traffic impact the entire system. So that includes both the Turnpike and the state roads. This traffic right here is specifically I-93 in Concord, exits 12 and 13. We have a traffic counter there. And you can see when COVID hit last March, the significant decline. We had about a 50% decline in traffic initially, and it has gradually begun to grow back. But even, so this is through December of last year, the red line is for 2021. So even this year in 2021, we're still seeing traffic down 12 to 13% at this point in April, as compared to the FY19's traffic prior to COVID. So you can see we're still down in traffic levels. And so how that has impacted revenue on the Turnpike system, we had Stantec a couple of years ago when we did a refunding on the Turnpike system, a bond refunding. We had Stantec review what our projected revenues would be. So that's this blue line here. They had projected modest growth, about little less than 1% a year on the Turnpike system, because it's a mature system as far as turnpikes go. When COVID hit, you can see we just recently in January had them do a revised outlook, related to tolls and what the traffic would look like and how that would impact us. You can see, we have actuals here for 20 and we're trending down into 21. They are projecting to see that increase, but not to the same levels that they had anticipated 2 years ago in 2019. And there are, several reasons for that. One of the biggest things is that they believe that the driving patterns for folks have changed, that, more folks will be working from home. There'll be fewer commuters. Telehealth is another thing that's come forward during the COVID. So all of that can impact traffic on the Turnpike system. And so they believe that will impact, the growth in the future, and it'll take a little bit longer. I think they're projecting 4 to 6 years before we actually get back to the levels in FY19. And so you can see down at the bottom of the screen, over that time frame, the difference between those two calculations over the 10-year period of 2021 through 2030, that's over $106 million decrease in projected revenue that we had thought we would be at 2 years ago to what we're projecting into the future. And so I'll go to the next slide. So because of these impacts and the reduction in revenue, that necessitated a 7.5% budget cut in FY22 in the Turnpike Fund. So we made reductions in various areas. And in FY23, we're assuming a flat budget to FY22. We did not request any additional prioritized needs. All operations, maintenance, debt service, and R&R requirements have been funded with the 22-23 budget. But overall, as you saw on that previous screen, our projected long-term revenue reduction will require delay of some capital projects. And during the House phase, there were no changes to the approved budget.
So Marie showed you the traffic numbers specifically for I-93 in Concord. If any of the committee members are interested, we have counters across the state as well as elsewhere on the Turnpike. So the Concord example shows you the traffic through the center of the state. Obviously, there's other plazas that are used predominantly by commuters where we've seen greater losses, whereas other areas we see more vacation traffic. And depending on the classification of roadways, we look across the rest of the system. In some cases, we're back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of traffic volumes. In other areas, there's still a significant reduction. So as Marie said, we're going to continue to monitor the traffic, especially once the safer at home restrictions are lifted May 7th, to understand how behaviors are going to be different. But the big concern right now is just the unknown. A lot of companies have realized efficiencies and employees have enjoyed the flexibility of telework in particular, and we're not sure what the future holds in terms of permanent trends. And just one more day of telework is potentially a 20% reduction in commuting traffic. So we have to work very closely with the business community as well to understand what the future will hold in terms of revenue, which is why we use Stantec, a consulting firm, to assist us. They work with a number of different turnpike authorities, and we're making sure that we update our models based on actual traffic as well as what we're hearing across the industry.
Thank you. So now we'll move to the highway fund. So we just related to the highway fund, just to clarify some things. The highway fund is not the DOT, and DOT is not the highway fund. The highway fund is the unrestricted revenue from the gas tax or the road toll and registration fees, and those are collected by the Department of Safety. So I know it can be confusing. DOT collects the turnpike tolls, but the Department of Safety collects the gas tax or road toll and registration fees. So there is a difference between the agencies there. The highway fund is also the fund where our federal construction reimbursement goes through. So we have our Garvey bonds and our TIFIA proceeds are collected here, and our federal funds flow through the highway fund. It is the primary source of funding for DOT's operating budget. And the revenue in the highway fund is appropriated to various agencies besides DOT, the safety, the judicial branch, justice, also receive funds from the highway fund. And just a highlight here, in 2020, 59% of the highway funds were appropriated to DOT, 26% went to other agencies, so safety and other agencies, and then 15% went directly to municipalities, and that's related to the block grant that the commissioner had spoken about before, the 12% that goes out to the municipalities. So just this slide is just to kind of show how the highway funds get distributed. So right off the top of when the highway funds are collected, those are reduced by the cost of collections for the Department of Safety. Then 12% of the gross road toll and motor vehicle fee revenues that are collected are block grant and are distributed to the municipalities. So that block grant flows through DOT's budget, but it's a direct pass through to all the municipalities across the state. Next, we have the State Highway and Bridge Betterment Account. So that is 2.6 cents or 88% of 3 cents. So right away on that, 3 cents goes to betterment, but 12% of that goes to the municipalities. So that's why you're seeing 2.6 cents. And of that road toll goes to the Bridge and Betterment Account for DOT. And that is utilized for paving and bridge repairs throughout the state on state-owned roads other than the Turnpike System. So we cannot use these funds on the Turnpike System, so they're used on those areas of the state. Then we have SB 367, which was the 4.2 cents passed in 2014. And again, 88% of that, because 12% goes to block grant initially to the municipalities. So about 3.7 cents is retained within DOT. And there is a waterfall within the law of how those funds can be spent. And I'll review that shortly in a couple slides. But primarily it's restricted for the debt service related to the I-93 project, which is the TIFIA loan. 6.8 million goes to the State Aid Bridge Fund for municipal bridges. And then if there are any funds remaining, those go towards the state highway and bridge betterment account used for paving and bridge repairs again. So of the overall 22.2 cent per gallon New Hampshire road toll, about 12.88 cents is available for appropriation to cover operating costs for both DOT, Department of Safety, and other agencies. So this next slide just kind of shows that breakdown of the 22.2 cent gas tax. I'm sorry it's small. Hopefully you can see it better on paper copies that you have. But we just wanted to show you how the numbers kind of break out of the actuals over time and how much has gone out to the municipalities via block grant, via betterment and those type of things. And then over in columns J, K, and L is where we show the actual breakdown as a percentage, the dollars as a percentage of where they were distributed to, whether it was the distribution to the municipalities, other agencies, or New Hampshire DOT. And so this next slide is related to the SB 367 waterfall that I discussed a moment ago. So this shows you that kind of waterfall breakdown based on the law of how these funds can be used. So the 4.2 cents, here are the actual revenues, and then what is projected in the budget, and then our projections going forward for this fund. So basically the revenue in this fund sunsets in 2035. So the law is written that it sunsets when debt service is paid or 20 years, whichever is sooner. So we're just showing here in 2035 that this revenue would go away based on the law as it's currently written. And the waterfall, again, so we have the gross revenue that comes in, 12% of the revenue related to the previous fiscal year gets distributed to the municipalities. Then we have the debt service cost of issuing bonds on the TIFIA loan. And what we did on the TIFIA loan was initially in the first 9 years, we're paying interest only. We deferred once the project was completed in 2020, we're deferring the payment of principal for up to 5 years. And so that is so that we could take advantage of the low interest rates, because the interest rate here is 1.09% that we received on this TIFIA loan. So we could take advantage of that interest rate, but also be able to dedicate additional funds towards paving and repairing red list bridges. So with these funds during this 10-year period, we're planning to repair and remove about 24 bridges from the red list and pave over 4,000 lane miles of pavement during this time frame. So you can see when we start in 2026, when we have to start paying debt service, that then there's no more betterment money going towards the paving and bridges, and potentially could reduce the funds going to state aid bridge because we have to pay the debt service first based on the law. So we wanted to just point that out to everyone that, 2025 is when the deferment will end and we'll have to start paying debt service at that point. And that can impact, the state aid bridge program, and also significantly will impact and reduce the amount of paving that we're able to do on the state system with that reduction in funds. So again, this is just to show some of the history of the highway fund unrestricted revenue. So this does not include betterment or that SB 367 revenue. This is the unrestricted portion that gets used in the operating budgets by Department of Safety and DOT. And so you can see back in 2010, there were some significant reductions related to some one-time revenues. When those went away, you can see some significant reductions. And then it's been fairly flat ever since. In the 21, 22, 23 budgets, you can see that it's not all that much different when you get to 2023. It's not all that much different than 2019. 2019 was 252 million. And the projections are 251 in 2023. That's primarily because in 2020, I have here, the plea by mail revenue was moved from restricted for the Department of Safety's Detective Bureau, and it was moved to unrestricted. So in 2020, that amounted to 5.6 million. And in the 22 and 23 budgets, it's about 8 million per year. So if you want to compare apples to apples, you need to, if you reduce that 8 million, you're really looking at 241 million in 22 compared to 252 in FY19 before COVID. So you are still seeing, reductions that in the revenue related to COVID, even going out into 22 and 23 on the gas tax and motor vehicle fee side, that, may not be visible when you're looking at it from this perspective, because the revenue did change in 2020 with the plea by mail. And then, with the history of the highway fund and some of the issues that it's had being solvent, there have been several one-time sources of revenue to help prop up the highway fund to be able to maintain services within DOT and safety. And so these areas here are some of the areas that where one-time revenues have been utilized to help fund it to avoid deficits in the fund. So you can see there was a $30 registration surcharge in 2010 and 2011, and then that was sunset. We here at DOT, we did some retro Turnpike toll credits to try to bring in some additional funds that where the state had paid the match on federal projects, but where we were allowed to go back and retroactively use toll credits. So we drew those funds back into the highway fund to try to help prop it up at that time. And then we had the I-95 bridge sale from the highway fund. That's the large bridge connecting Maine and New Hampshire over on the seacoast. So that bridge was sold from the highway fund to the Turnpike fund. $120 million loan that was initially to be paid over 20 years. It was paid back over a little over 6 years. And that additionally helped the highway fund at that time. And then we have had some general fund infusions in 2017, 2020, and again in this budget in 2022. And then, of course, as the commissioner stated earlier, that $41 million of federal relief funds was a significant hole that was filled in this budget in fiscal year 2022 to help maintain the health of the highway fund and keep the balance from being negative and to avoid significant cuts for the department and safety. So just a little overview of what we did during this time frame in the highway fund during the budget. So in FY22 and 23, the department was required to make some cuts. So we were required to have a 7% reduction in our agency phase for FY22 and a 1% increase from that to FY23. So the department reduced its fleet equipment by $6 million per year. We reduced preventative maintenance programs and that were put in the FY 2021 budget, and due to COVID and the restrictions that we had on, and knowing that the revenue was really reduced there, we hadn't initiated those programs, so we cut them in this next budget. So we had bridge washing of about 1.7 million per year, guardrail repairs of $1 million per year, tree trimming and brush clearing of about 1.5 million per year, and then graffiti removal of 200,000 per year. And then we also had reduced temporary positions related to our engineering intern program. And again, as the commissioner stated before, in the governor's phase, We displaced $41 million of highway funds with the federal funding for that relief that we received. And also HB 1817 were general funds that were appropriated to the department for state-owned bridge projects into a non-lapsing account. There's approximately 8.1 million of unspent appropriations that the governor had determined would lapse into the highway fund. There was one bridge project that was waiting to be completed in that. We were able to identify federal funds to make the repairs on that bridge. And so that is why we're able to lapse those funds to help support the highway fund. The other additional needs that were funded by the governor were our debt service for capital projects that had been previously approved and for the current budget, and block grant increases, just to be able to provide what was actually required by law in the 12%. The governor's office also increased our winter maintenance budget to be equivalent to our 3-year average. So we received about $12 million over the biennium for our winter maintenance. And then also additional funds for other agencies, DOIT, General Services, Department of Justice were provided for those agencies for their additional needs. And then our project development engineering intern program was also funded by the governor. So then again, we go to the slide we had seen before that the commissioner spoke to related to the House. The House had reduced, House Ways and Means had reduced the highway fund revenue projections by about $6 million. So the department did have cuts made to winter maintenance, but then the House understood the needs and a lot of cuts we'd already made during the agency phase. And as the commissioner stated, in HB2 provided 19 million in general funds to help these areas that were previously cut. There are some additional needs that have not been funded on the highway side. Many of these, again, you can see the preventative maintenance for guardrail repair and the bridge washing that were cut before. We have some smaller equipment needs. During COVID, we were asked to, watch our spending. And so the department took that very seriously. And so there was equipment and other things that the department wasn't able to purchase due to the state of emergency. So there are some smaller equipment items and other things in here, whether it's ITS devices, the graffiti removal, and telematics that we haven't been able to move forward with due to the funding. And then something we talk about a lot is the FHW payback related to Conway. And so that's related to the 10 and 20 year rule that FHWA has. So if we begin engineering on a project and we don't move to purchasing right of way within 10 years, and then or construction in 10 years, then we have to pay back any funds we've expended on engineering. And likewise with right of way, we have 20 years. So once we begin right of way purchasing land, if we don't move to construction within 20 years, we have to pay back any land that we had purchased. So with regards to Conway, that is what happened. We're beyond 20 years of purchasing land and property for the Conway bypass. That project is not in the 10-year plan and has been, I believe it's been dissolved through governor and council. So we will have a payback for the Conway bypass, and we're a little bit short. So we're asking for 2 million per year. We're about 7 million short, but we wanted to start trying to get some of that, the additional funds that we needed to be able to pay back Federal Highway when they make that request. So next I'll turn it over to the commissioner to discuss some of our issues and challenges going forward.
So as you've heard our presentation today. I think you'll have an appreciation of how challenging the COVID-19 pandemic was for DOTs. We, as Marie said, really took the direction to control spending very seriously. We were looking at the traffic volumes, looking at the revenue projections. And so the department tightened, we tightened our belts across the board in every area. And so last year we did succeed in lapsing about 38 million, which was well above our projected lapse. Meanwhile, we were advocating at the federal level for relief for all modes of transportation, for the airports that we partner with the transit operators, and then for direct relief for state DOTs, given where our revenues were trending. Fortunately, we received the 41 million, and then we were looking at still significant gaps, but fortunately, in working with the House, they understood some of the challenges and were able to identify the additional general fund dollars. So at the end of the House phase, we were in a much more positive position than where perhaps we could have been. I'll be honest, when we were starting the agency phase, we were very concerned about how things were going to end up. Long term, yes, we have some challenges with the highway fund, but we really appreciate the efforts of the legislature. Every biennium, when we've brought forward our needs, there's been a solution. And we went through all of the one-time solutions that have been provided. And certainly we'll continue to advocate for some federal assistance, but it's unlikely that going forward, while there's a lot of talk about infrastructure investment, it's much more construction type work. It wouldn't be dollars that could be used within our operating budget. Currently, the federal laws prohibit the use of federal funds for routine maintenance and operating. It was truly the exception with the CRISA Act that we were given money with no strings attached that was flowing through the Department of Transportation. And now there may be other opportunities with federal resources that don't come through US DOT, but that's something that we continue to evaluate. So overall, we're in a much better position than we thought we would be. Longer term concerns, we still have a backlog when it comes to the age of our fleet and trucks that are eligible for replacement under the state's replacement parameters. We did have to defer a lot of work last year when we were restricting spending. That meant we, for example, we didn't hire our seasonal traffic help for line striping. Instead, we took our highway maintenance forces and we had them supplement our traffic crews to be able to do critical things like line striping. That was because we were trying to save money on materials and didn't want to switch out pipes and replace culverts in a year where our financial future was uncertain. So we do have now a backlog of some of the maintenance efforts that we're getting to work this season trying to complete. Longer term, we still have a lot of needs on the roadways that are not eligible for federal funds. And while we continue to pursue and follow all of the federal funding opportunities, just some of the assets that we have that need repair are not eligible for those funds. Another disappointing thing, the most recent discretionary grant program that Federal Highway announced is called the RAISE program. And in the past, we would have used our toll credits to access those dollars, but unfortunately, they're not allowing toll credits. They're asking for a cash match to access those programs. So there's some changes happening at the federal level that will impact New Hampshire DOT. And so we're going to be starting our 10-year plan process this summer. Once the budget is finalized, talking to municipalities about the State Aid Bridge program and their local needs, as well as our state needs. Hopefully by that point, we'll have more certainty around what federal funding might be available for DOT. It's obviously very promising right now with both the discussions around an infrastructure bill, and then also our federal surface transportation authorization runs out this September. The FAST Act expires on September 30th. So they're also talking about passage of a typical transportation bill as well. And so there'll be lots to discuss during the 10-year plan period. But like I said, overall, from an operations perspective, the House version of the budget puts us in a much more favorable position, especially given our concerns around additional relief dollars not being available for operations and maintenance. And lastly, I just touch on transit. While we have received only the 41 million for support for highways, there has been several of the congressional relief packages providing assistance to both our transit operators as well as our airports. And it's been a relief to those entities to see that support from Congress, because as you can imagine, some of the modes of transportation that were hardest hit at the very beginning of the pandemic were aeronautics and public transportation. It took a little bit longer for us to feel the effects. So we continue to advocate on their behalf as well.
So the only other thing I wanted to bring up is a potential change request that the department has. Since the House phase, we've come across a couple of items where we need to make corrections to the budget. So we wanted to bring these forward, and that's why if you don't want to address them today, we can address them another time. But just wanted to bring these forward for discussion so that we could get the budget up to date prior to its passage in June.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for taking my question. Can you tell me why the House Finance Committee added the general funds in HB2 instead of into HB1?
So I'm not sure. I think it was something that they chose to pursue towards the end of the budget process. And so rather than adding the general fund dollars into HB1 and having to update all of the various accounting lines, they chose to do it through HB2. At least that's my understanding. But LBA could probably give you a better sense of how those last few days played out.
Thank you.
Further questions? I presume that you have a list of red listed bridges line somewhere?
Just recently, we updated our red list bridge report, and that is available online, but we could also provide you with a hard copy if you were interested. But certainly we can send you an electronic, a link to the electronic version after this meeting.
Okay, that would be good, thank you. Have you been having a hard time getting contractual labor, particularly for plowing, things like that?
Yes, it has been challenging. Our rates are not particularly competitive in the southern part of the state. And so for several years, we've been struggling to attract an adequate number of contractors to plow for us. And then further during the pandemic, there was just a real shortage of CDL drivers. So this was a challenging year. And so we we're very stringent around our COVID-19 protocols to make sure that the workforce that was available continued to stay healthy so that we were prepared during more significant winter weather.
Thank you. And has the department considered privately selling any of those toll administration buildings where the tolls have been taken down, such as on exit 12 in Merrimack?
So we are currently working on the widening of the FE Everett Turnpike to provide a consistent 3 lanes in each direction. As part of those projects, it would be our intent to demolish those buildings. Some of them have been closed for longer than others, and they're in generally a poor state of repair. We did take the steps to cap those tunnels that go under the highway to allow the toll attendants to go from one side of the roadway to the other. So some steps were taken, but the goal would be through those through the widening project to address those facilities once and for all.
Would it make sense to try to sell those privately so that the department has revenue from it as opposed to spending hundreds of thousands to demolish it?
So really, in the current condition, there's little viable use. What we will do through the widening project is reestablish the layout of the highway, and then, if possible, surplus any of the land that we can. But we have to, as I mentioned, there's a tunnel that goes under the highway at each of these toll locations. And so we have some work to do in those areas.
I think accessibility also became a challenge, particularly for the ramp tolls where the admin building was on exit 12 and stuff, because of it being kind of limited access and not on a public road. So you have the admin building there that was on the on-ramp. So access to it also becomes a challenge in terms of a commercially viable type of enterprise.
And talking to the deputy commissioner, my understanding is you had access to those from the sides, from other directions, not necessarily getting on from the ramps, which I understand the danger in that.
Right.
But he didn't mention anything about the buildings being so bad that they wouldn't be sellable. In fact, he seemed to be leaning toward that might be a viable possibility. That's why I asked the question. Any further questions from the committee? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two areas that I'd like to question. One is, can you speak to the relationship between the mass transit bus system and the department, and how revenues are going in that regard, and what the responsibilities of the department are, and the contractors and so forth?
So the department works very closely with all of the public bus operators in the state. And then we also partner with the private bus companies that provide both intercity and commuter service to the Boston market. We do not collect any of the revenue. In each of those transit agencies is responsible for their own revenue collection operations. The department's involvement is around the funding that is provided from the Federal Transit Administration. And so there's FTA dollars that flow through the DOT to those recipients. In the case of the smaller urban providers, they do receive some direct assistance. And then there's other categories of federal transit funding that flow through the DOT. In the case of all of the federal relief funding that came during the COVID-19 period, we as DOT did work to ensure that those dollars reached all of the operators in a timely fashion and could be put to good use as soon as possible. And then there are some funds that come to us specifically associated with the Boston urbanized area. Those are the dollars that we use to manage and operate the state's Boston Express service, which is operated under contract, but is a state-funded service. And so, of course, we're involved in the revenue collection and monitoring the operations of that particular service. What we've heard in general terms is in the rural areas, they saw an increase in ridership early on in the pandemic, and things have sort of plateaued out. It took a little bit longer in the more urban communities. I think as the safer at home guidance was modified and more businesses flexed open, we saw a corresponding increase in the use of public transit. But I would say that ridership on the local systems in the urban areas is probably around 50% of pre-pandemic levels. Again, we'll be watching that very closely, and the department has meetings. We have a check-in with all of the urban transit providers every couple of weeks to hear how things are going for them. The area that's still the most significantly impacted would be those intercity and commuter trips down to Boston. And it's our private bus companies that have probably been hardest hit during the pandemic because of the changes in travel patterns, both the change in air travel as well as commuter travel, because a big part of their service is to the Logan Airport area, as well as connections down to Boston.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second area, increasingly noticed invasive species called bittersweet. DES deals with aquatic invasive species. Department of Agriculture doesn't have the resources at this point or the authorization. Do you have invasive species, folks? How many, and what are we doing about bittersweet?
So I could certainly look into that. I'll let Bill talk about what we currently have for resources. We do have a Bureau of Environment staff that help advise the department. And then we have maintenance forces that support some of the efforts. But Bill, do you want to offer? more?
Yeah, I can offer just some generalities. So we do have personnel in our Bureau of Environment who are trained and look at invasive species. So every one of our generalist and environmental coordinators, assess that on our projects, as well as provide support to operations in terms of invasive species. So we do have a program with each of our districts to try to control invasive species. We work hand in hand with Department of Agriculture, and a number of our field operations folks, are trained in herbicide applications and stuff to help to control it. I'm not specifically aware of bittersweet. I'm sure it's one of the ones I know of. The biggest concern in the past years had been Japanese knotweed and stuff that was pretty prolific. But we also have specifications in our construction contracts that where there are invasive species encountered, that they have to be treated in certain ways. They have to be buried 10 feet deep. They have to be removed from the site. Equipment and stuff has to be washed to prevent its spread and, really spread, carrying it much wider distances. So I'm sure there's always more that can be done, but it certainly is an aspect that we have some resources assigned to addressing it.
Follow up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill, how many invasive species folks do you have in your Bureau of Environment? Folks that are actually trained to do it or to train others to do it? The local municipalities, for example.
All of our environmental coordinators do have environmental species training, so that would be 4 to 5 people. But as I say, they're more in a train the trainer mode. So every one of our districts has been trained, and I don't have the numbers there, but at least 4 to 5. But we have been training specific people in each of the 6 maintenance districts to serve as that local field, not as much for the municipalities, but for our own patrol highway maintenance personnel.
Would it be possible for you to provide information on bittersweet specifically? It's invasive and it's killing trees is what it does. It actually wraps and strangles the trees, and that's causing significant problems with down the road with erosion and those types of things. So
Yep.
I'd like to consider perhaps growing the program in that sense for bittersweet, as strange as that might sound. That is a nasty species that is wiping out swaths of forests along our highways and roads.
Well,
So, as I say, Senator, I would say that we agree with you. We certainly see bittersweet as much more prevalent today than it was in the past. One of the challenges we have is, even though we have the training and we understand what steps need to be taken to control it, it's, as always, it's the resources to actually get out there and do the clearing and do the treatment itself. So we would welcome the opportunity to talk in more detail about our invasive species program and the gaps that we have in meeting department needs, as well as how we could better partner with communities.
I would welcome that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, not either individually, certainly to work with you to develop something, because this thing just keeps getting worse and worse. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I just want to thank you for replacing the medians on the Turnpike around the Bedford tolls. I know that was not scheduled to be done until this year at the earliest, but I noticed it's been done, and thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation today. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
And Chair will be in recess for 10 minutes. Committee Okay, if the committee would please come back to order. Our next presentation is with the Department of Education. Chair will recognize Commissioner Edelblu. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm happy to join you. I have a slide presentation. I'm not sure if you want me to put that up or if you want to just work off of the copies that you have with you. Is there a preference?
I guess it depends on how small your print is.
Some of it's pretty small.
Go ahead and put it up if you'd like.
Okay, so Tammy, I think we have to move Tammy into the conversation here. She has the presentation. If we might do that. Tammy Valancourt, who is our CFO. There we go. And then Tammy will be able to share the presentation. So Tammy, you can go ahead and share, Tammy.
1 second.
Okay.
Is it there?
Yep, great. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, Tammy. This is just our introduction here. So just to give you an overview of the agency and where all of our various positions are located, we have 287 staff members, 5 unclassified, 282 classified. We run really 4 divisions. The first is really Division of Workforce Innovation. That is a division that does not currently have. Timmy, you might want to check. I'm not seeing the presentation anymore. I don't know if the other members are or not. There you go.
How's that?
Thank you. That's better.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, the first Division of Workforce Innovation. This is a division that is in statute, but has not had a funded division director for a number of years, going way back before my time, I think decades potentially even. And so most of the activities in that division fall under the Office of the Deputy Commissioner. And the main activity in there is really where we house our vocational rehabilitation activities. In addition to that, we also house our Bureau of Governance, which includes our educator misconduct and our investigation activities, as well as several other administrative functions. The next division that we have is the Division of Education Analytics and Resources. Caitlin Davis, who many of you know, is the division director for this division. And Caitlin is working with all things data with respect to our education reporting, as well as our accountability systems for our education institutions, public, private, across the board. The next division is our Division of Learner Supports and Educational Improvement. This is the division that is headed by Mackenzie Snow, who is our most recent division director who joined the department. This division has responsibility for, or the bulk of the responsibility is around the title program. So this would be our Title I, our Title II, our Title III, our Title IV, Title IV-B type 21C programs. IDEA for our special education students. And so all of those programs are housed in this division. And then the final division is the Division of Educator Support and Higher Education. Division director for this division is Stephen Appleby. And this division has responsibility for educator credentialing. So we manage the credentials in the neighborhood of 27,000 educators, both here in New Hampshire, and many educators who are certified in New Hampshire but maybe practice in another state or in another jurisdiction, as well as responsibility for our higher education programs, which includes our teacher preparation programs, as well as an administrative and some oversight responsibility with the Higher Education Commission for our institutions of higher education in the state of New Hampshire. That is the basic organization at the agency. And so Tammy, you can switch over to the next slide. So on this slide, what I was hoping to provide for you is just a little bit of information, historical information, in terms of how our agency is both funded and how on a high level those funds are dispersed, and try to give you some trends over a period of time. As you can see, our principal revenue sources, this is sort of set up like a P&L statement. We have general funds. Most of those general funds come to us through line items like the business profits tax or the business enterprise tax. We are also funded through a portion of the meals and rentals tax, the tobacco tax, the real estate transfer tax, which is a tax which has seen some increases. And so we have a bit of a surplus there ourselves in that line item. We also receive funding through lottery, which is also having a good year. And so we have, we're ahead of plan on that revenue source for our agency. But those are some of the funds that come into us via the general fund. We also receive federal funds. And you'll see on these line items, these are what I would refer to as the recurring federal funds. So these are programs that are principally ongoing. There are a couple of exceptions of grant applications that we have applied for and one, which we can talk to, but mostly ongoing funds. The other thing that is not reflected in these federal funds would be right now funds relative to, and mostly pass-through funds, but COVID relief types of activities in this historical analysis. And then we obviously have the education trust funds and other funds, which is, various fee types of funds or other types of things like that. And you can see historically, our head count, we're at 287 now, which represents the head count on the organization chart that I presented to you on the previous slide. On the next slide, what I want to do is just kind of walk through our budget, both the agency submitted, the governor's recommendation, and the House recommended budget, and specifically address a couple of line items, but respond to questions that individuals may have with respect to that. One of the areas that I think is important to consider is if you see, and this was on the previous slide as well, but I'll highlight it here, relative to building aid, tuition and transportation in particular. Those are two line items that in previous budgets were what I would refer to as above the line. They were moved down into the Education Trust Fund. And so those funds now reside in the Education Trust Fund. And so I don't know if Tam, if you want to just highlight, I think they're like the last lines on the bottom there. Because sometimes people are like, well, what happened to these lines? It's like the last two or the third to last there. Yeah, there you go. So they were simply moved out of the general funds and into the Education Trust Fund, just to let you know where those ended up. And then again, if I just move down a little bit further, areas that I wanted to highlight is differences between the agency submitted budget and where we ended up with. So we did have the New Hampshire Scholars Program, which we had initially funded in our budget, and the department has historically funded that program. We really didn't get an appropriation to fund that until this last biennium budget. Before that, we were funding it through a kind of a conglomeration of funds, mostly centered around SARA and other higher education programmatic fees, building the nexus to the program because this is really preparing students for that post-secondary world. Another change that you will see is on 9007, but dual and concurrent. So we had 950 initially in our budget, and that's not showing in our budget. And I don't want anybody to panic around that. That is because those funds and that program has been transferred to the community college system. And so that will be funded directly through the community college system right now. And it probably makes sense for that to happen. I would even, and I say that because while it was initially at the department when we were getting that program stood up, it really is a program that is administered principally through the community college system. And we were really just a pass-through entity for that. And now that the program has been fully stood up, it's really just in a operational mode. And that's how it's going to operate over at the community college system. You may have already heard from them relative to that in their budget. And then the last program is really the robotics program. We initially had 750 in. We were not able to sustain that through the governor's phase, but then the House found some additional funding for that. I believe that that is a program that is important to the governor and the governor's office in terms of the ability to encourage and promote STEM education and STEM opportunities for students across the state, and really is giving our students skills that are going to help them in no matter what their career path might be, STEM or not STEM, but really to engage a 21st century economy. And so that we're very excited about that program and are happy that the House was able to put that back in. So if I continue to move down further in the presentation, you'll see on the organization chart, oh, not that, come back up one more, sorry, not quite ready to go there. You'll see that there's another line item, which is the last line item on that spreadsheet, which is our special education aid, formerly to some was known as CAT aid, but special education aid is the correct name now. And you'll see that that is $30,800,000 in both our budget as well as the governor's recommended budget. And then the House has increased that to $33,252,000. I will tell you that in this in this last year, at the $30,800,000, we had a small surplus, so we were able to pay all of the state special education aid requests to the department and had a small surplus in that. I believe that the House is concerned that the claims against those funds may have been represented because of the disruption of COVID. And so that in future years, there may be additional requests or demands on that money, which would force us to prorate our special education out to the various districts. Just a couple of things I want to point out relative to that is that we have received additional funding for special education aid. The governor allowed us to use portions of funds out of emergency relief funds, and then we ultimately didn't even need to use that because we had surplus funds in our IDEA grants that we were able to make available to the districts. And then through the ARP legislation, Congress has appropriated to the state an additional $10.5 million of funds to be used specifically for special education. And those funds as well will flow through to the districts and they'll be able to access those for the next 3 years. One of the things that you'll want to consider in terms of the increase in the state appropriation for special education aid is the fact that we do have an MOE, a maintenance of effort calculation, that if those funds are subsequently reduced, there would be a downward penalty in the federal allocation for the funds that we might receive. And then the final line that I want to point out to you on this slide is our headcount of 294, which represents an increase of 7 positions from what was on the historical slide. And I have a slide and I'll walk you through where those increases are and why we believe that they're appropriate to add. So you can go to the next slide, Tammy. And what you'll see here is these are our general fund prioritized needs. There is the statewide student information system and data warehouse. This is a project that a number of you are probably familiar with. I have been seeking this for a couple of budget cycles now. If for no other reason than the cost savings that can be realized across our education system. Because of the decentralized and disconnected way that we accumulate data across the state, we literally have, years of staff time that is invested principally at the district level, but also at the state level, in order to accumulate, validate information that is reported to the department. Much of the information we get is exported from a local district system into an Excel spreadsheet, and then uploaded from an Excel spreadsheet into our system and imported. And we have to go through very strenuous data scrubbing and accuracy just to make sure that we have, we have correct information that we're reporting out on. A simple example of what that might look like is just a student who transfers from one town to another town. One district maybe gets that load correct, another district maybe misses that load. And so now we have to figure out where is this student and where do they belong? How do we, when does that transfer take place? And we have to figure all those things out to be able to accurately pay our adequacy funding to the various districts. So just one example, but we'll save, years of staff time. It will improve data security because right now the data is distributed through systems that some have high levels of security, some less so. Some very sophisticated, some very unsophisticated in terms of how that information is stored and protected. So we can improve data security. And then finally, it will improve data responsiveness in terms of being able to respond to the legislature or many of our other constituencies around the state and around the country who ask for various pieces of information. And while I say that, I want to make sure that we're clear. The way that this technology works and can be architected, the department would only have information to the same information it has now, because the system is able to be configured so that we only have visibility to what we need and districts only have visibility to what they need. But because we are working off of a common data warehouse, we can get at the information and we don't have to do quite as much data validation and data scrubbing through that process. So can achieve cost savings as well as improved responsiveness, improved security over that data. So would continue to advocate for a statewide student information system. The next position that you have down there is the fund administrator position. And this is a position that we are seeking in a reorganization that I had done at the department. I had flattened the organization and flattened out both the title programs administrator as well as assessment, two programs that interact quite a bit, and tried to run that with two separate bureau leads at a different level. Having done that for some time now, I can see the opportunity to restore that position, to have an administrator who would have oversight responsibility over both of those bureaus at the department. And I think that there may be some benefits in terms of efficiencies and additional collaboration between those activities. And so I'm asking for that position to be restored. Okay, on the next slide. These are our additional position requests relative to federal funds. The first is really one of our positions around our charter school grant. As many of you know, we received a $46 million charter school grant. Once we gained access to those funds through the fiscal and legislative process, we began the process of recruiting. That grant supports 2 staffed positions. We started to recruit for that position. And what we discovered is that as the administrator, we were not able to, or were having difficulty finding someone as an administrator 1 who has the capacity to be able to successfully administer a $46 million grant with its complexities. So we are looking to upgrade from a administrator 1 to an administrator 3 by really swapping out. So our budget included an administrator 1, and we'd like to turn that into an administrator 3 position. So really it's more of an upgrade than a new position. And then the second is the business systems analyst. And this as well is for a grant, a new grant at the Department of Education that we received around the time we were working on the budget, but now we've gotten approval for activities in that grant. And this is our SLDS grant, Student Longitudinal Data System. And this position would be paid for out of that grant. And so we're asking that that be added now that we have federal go ahead with the activities that we're going to be working on in that grant program. If you go to the next slide. So this again is a new grant that we received after the various budget submissions had been added. But when those budget submissions were done, all of the indirect cost allocations had not been set up. So we really are just adding some line items to this federal grant to be able to have the right accounting codes for that grant. This is a grant that's dealing with career pathways, principally around setting up work-based learning opportunities for high school students. And we're working with the New Hampshire Learning Initiative to roll that grant out. And the next slide. This is another grant that more information since we first submitted our budget. We initially submitted our budget at $2.4 million because we believed that that was the level of grant that we would be receiving. That's what we had sought. The grant ultimately came in at $2.9 million. And so we're asking a remove and replace on this one to just put in a budget that would reflect the full amount of the grant that we received through the federal programs. And then on the final slide, this is a, oops, not there. Sorry, not the final slide, but the next slide. This is, I would imagine, a peculiar looking budget for you. But one of the things that we are exploring is the ability to consolidate our administrative funds across our federal programs. So that would be in each federal program. So for example, in Title I, most of those funds are pass-through funds, which means they basically, we receive them and we pass them through to the school districts. But in each of those funds, we generally receive an allocation, usually about 0.5%, to be used for administering those grants. The way that we administer those grants right now is by using what's referred to our PARs, or we have our staff people who are working on the various grants do actual labor claiming against the grants. So if I work an hour on Title I, I'm going to charge an hour of my time to Title I. If I work an hour on Title IV, I'll charge an hour to Title IV. And we do time collection against the various grants. There is a waiver process available at the federal level that would allow us to do what's called consolidating the administrative funds. We don't know that it is A, that we would be successful at a waiver, or even B, that it would improve the efficiency of our operation, because it would allow individuals to have more flexibility in terms of their time and how they're allocating their time against the different grants. We intend to explore that and potentially seek a waiver, but that would all take place after the budget cycle. And so what we were asking here is that we just establish an accounting unit for those consolidated administrative funds in the event we pursue that waiver, so that we can then implement it if we wanted to go forward. If we were successful with that, then we would come to the fiscal committee to populate this with the appropriate funds and appropriation to be able to run a consolidated administrative funds process, assuming that we were successful in receiving that waiver. One of the reasons why you see there are several line items that have actual numbers in there is because our understanding is at the agency level, in order to create an accounting unit, we're required to put a staff into that accounting unit. And so that's what we've done, is we've put a vacant position into there, again, just as a placeholder to be able to go forward. But that is the reason for this, to see if our grant will pay for 2 positions. We are asking that we swap the admin 1 for an admin 3, so we can get someone with the capacity to be able to effectively manage that at those various salary bands, as we have been actively trying to recruit. And then the other is around our disability determination unit. So the way that that works is that is fully federally funded. We basically are an outsourced operation for the federal government around Social Security disability determination services. We provide the services directly to the Social Security Administration and their clients. They have asked us to expand our mission, which would include adding 5 additional adjudicators and processors for those disability determination claims and determinations. And so we would be adding those to our organization, but would need to have those positions to be able to do that. And then the one additional position that came in is really around the SLDS grant, the federal grant for the Student Longitudinal Data System grant that we spoke to previously. So that is the highlights of our budget. And now I'm happy to answer questions that anyone may have.
Thank you,
And then,
Commissioner.
Tim, if you want to go back to the budget slide, that may be the easiest one to kind of play off of.
Any questions from the committee? While they're deliberating, what's a 7D?
So 7D is the form that is required when we are making a request for a staff, for a personnel. So it's called a 7D form.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that, using that vernacular.
And on your budget there on the special education, the last line, you
Yes.
made a statement that that any reduction in that, basically there's a federal penalty on that. Can you clarify if that reduction is from the 30.8 million or the 33.9 million that the House increased to?
So it would be, so there would not be any reduction in the current budget. So if we increase spending to 33.252, as is recommended in the House budget, we would be fine. What would happen is if we subsequently decrease that number, then there would be a 1-for-1 decrease in our IDEA grant that we would receive, because we've, like our MOE would be going down.
Okay, let me phrase the question a different way.
Sorry.
If we came in at 20, if we decided to change everything to 29 million,
So what would happen is then we would, if we went to 29 million.
so
and
we would get basically penalized by the Fed for lowering that down, correct?
That's correct. And we would, if you went to 29 million, if we went from $30.8 million this year to 29 million next year, we would see a $1.8 million reduction in our federal grant.
Okay, and so if we increased, we agreed to, or let's say that we disagreed with the House recommendation and we decided to go to 32 million. Would we be penalized because we're lower than the House, or we're okay because we're higher than the 30.8?
Exactly. So you would be fine, and you would be fine. And you would also be fine if you went to the 33. It would only be if you reduced the 33 or after you spent it in 1 year, or if we spend 32 1 year and then we reduce that. So it's only on the reduction that you have an MOE penalty.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Now, Senator Morse.
Yeah, Commissioner, God, we went around in circles on that one. If we were to go with your recommendation and the governor's recommendation of 30.8, are we okay going there?
So we're going to get an additional $10.5 million of special education funding this year from the federal government that was not anticipated. And we just were awarded that in the last couple of months through the ARP Act. So, I mean, our districts spend a lot of money on special education services. At 30.8 this year, we had a small amount of surplus. So my sense is that the combination of the 30.8 plus the additional federal funds that we would see coming into the state, would help us to achieve parity for the needs that we would have in our that are reflected and submitted to the department.
So am I correct in understanding that it would then be the 30.8 plus the 10.5 that'd be going back to our communities?
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Further question, Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Could you tell me the administrative position that you're looking for? It says swap this administrative 3 position with the administrative 1 requested. Is that requested position actually in your budget right now? And if so, what would be the reduction in 22 and 23?
So the administrator one position is in our budget already. And so we're really just doing a swap. So what I think the question you're asking is, what is the net increase? So for example, in FY22, if we're at 135,728, that represents the cost of an administrator three position, but we would not need the administrator one position. So I see Tammy working on her calculator and she's maybe got the difference for you, but I think that's a legitimate question. Do you know the answer to that, Tammy?
So we requested an admin one in the 22-23 budget. And that was approximately, say, $108,000, because if you look at the previous page, an administrator one was 108. So now we're asking for 132. So you're looking about $27,000 increase in federal funds that we would be looking for.
So
Thank
did that
you.
help, Senator?
Yes, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you so much.
And we have the Public Utilities Commission. Yeah, she's on. Chair will recognize Diane Martin. Good afternoon, Diane. We've got you muted right now. There we go. Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, excellent. Good afternoon, Chairman Daniels and members of the committee. My name is Diane Martin and I serve as the chairwoman of the Public Utilities Commission. The chair of the commission has a dual role, serving as both the presiding officer of the regulatory body, as well as the head of the agency that supports the commission. With me today remotely are Deborah Howland, the executive director of the commission, as well as Karen Crampton, the director of the Sustainable Energy Division. When we reach the site evaluation committee part of the presentation, Vice Chair Bob Scott will also join me for that. House Bill 2 creates a Department of Energy that includes many of the Public Utilities Commission functions. For that reason, no budget was included in the governor's budget presented to the House related to the Public Utilities Commission. And we did not make a budget presentation like this one in the House. We are using our efficiency budget as presented to the governor for today's purposes. So turning to the commission. The mission of the commission is, as you all know, a very important one. It involves making sure that we all have the gas, electricity, water, and sewer services that we need, that are safe, that we can rely on, and that come at a price that is just and reasonable. I've come to learn since joining the commission a little over a year ago that the work of the commission in accomplishing that important mission is both broad and varied. It covers a wide range of topics from energy efficiency to rate making, and handles cases that run the gamut from simple hearings and public meetings that take an hour or two to cases that involve very significant legal issues that require lengthy proceedings. Importantly, it involves a significant amount of customer service, taking calls from the citizens of New Hampshire and helping to resolve their issues. It also involves vital safety work related to the gas pipelines in the state, as well as the Dig Safe program and inspections and investigations to make sure our utilities are provided safely. The work of the commission is complex and challenging and requires both legal and financial expertise. The staff of the commission is comprised of a group of experts who are economists, engineers, accountants, lawyers, and analysts, as well as an incredible support staff who work hard to make sure the commission is able to perform its duties. They are a bright, talented, and very hardworking group. Before joining the commission a little over a year ago, I did not fully appreciate the volume of work done by the commission. If you can turn to your handout, slides 3 through 8 highlight some of the important work that is done by the commission. If you look at slide 3, it shows the number of dockets that are handled during a fiscal year. For example, in fiscal year 20, there were a total of 181 different types of dockets between electric, sustainable, gas, water and sewer, and a very limited amount of telecommunications dockets. In the next slide, it shows you the number of orders issued, which averages about 100, a little more than 100 per year. It's a significant volume of order writing and decision-making that happens at the commission. On slide 5, you'll see the hearings held, and it shows you whether it's a pre-hearing conference, a full hearing, rulemaking hearings. We also take public comment at public statement hearings, and then we have public meetings of the commission, which are separately held. You will see what I think is a very informative slide on page 6, the number of inquiries made to the commission. The largest number of inquiries come in related to the electric utility services that are provided. That is in fiscal year 20, about 4,000 contacts to the commission related to that. And some of the other utilities have smaller numbers. But you can see that that's a significant piece of the work that the commission provides. And on slide 7, another important component of the work at the commission that people are not necessarily aware of is the safety division work. The safety division has pipeline safety inspectors who go out and inspect pipelines throughout the state, which is obviously very important work. They also do investigations when there are accidents and other things related to electric utilities or other type of utilities. And so for that work, we have investigators and people trained to do that kind of work. The safety division also interacts with me and Homeland Security on all the storm preparation work that happens related to utilities. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on there for the safety division. Okay, and to accomplish this work, the commission has 73 full-time employees at the moment. 10 of those positions are vacant. We had a number of openings at the time that there was a freeze on hiring. That freeze was recently lifted, and so we are working on filling some of those positions at the moment. If you take a look at slide 8, you will see the significant proceedings before the commission. This is an important slide because it highlights how much work is going on at the moment at the commission. As I said, I'm fairly new addition to the commission, but I understand that the number of cases that are currently being filed is an increase over what has historically been at the commission, particularly rate cases. There are a significant number of water rate cases, and we have had nearly all of the electric utilities file their rate cases within a 1.5-year period of time. So the most significant cases are all occurring at the same time at the commission, which has resulted in a very busy commission with a very heavy workload. And you can see the different types of dockets by utility type, gas dockets, and then electric dockets. So those highlight the types of work going on in the proceedings. And of course, during these times, we've been challenged by COVID. We were asked by the governor to continue to provide the same level of service to the citizens of New Hampshire, but to do it as efficiently as possible, all while meeting the challenges related to having additional workload. The commission has met that challenge. We continue to hold hearings, take calls from citizens, and inspect utilities. Our front desk person has been there and present throughout this pandemic, waiting to serve the public when they come in. We have done all of that while cutting costs wherever possible and eliminating non-essential spending. I'm very proud to say that the commission is as productive as it has ever been despite these challenging times. The commission, as you know, receives no general funds. Instead, the commission receives funding from several sources. If you take a look at slide 9, it highlights for you the different types of revenues that come in and the different types of expenses. There are a number of expenses, and so it kind of gets sliced down into small parts, but at least gives you an idea of some of the most significant ones. Personnel is obviously a very large portion of the expenses because most of what we do at the commission involves people, experts working on cases. If you look at slide 10, you'll see the Renewable Energy Fund slide, and that gives you a good highlight of how much revenue has come in related to alternative compliance payments and into the Renewable Energy Fund since 2008. We included that slide so that you can have a good sense of how it can be difficult to predict what amount of revenue will come in related to ACP revenue. It really varies depending upon the market, not just the New Hampshire market, but what's happening in the region. And so you can see that the change over a period of years can be very, very significant. We did our best when trying to project what revenue may come in during the next biennium, and we did that by using a conservative approach, looking at these numbers and our most recent trends, which have been downward. And then if you turn to slide 11, you'll see the RGGI fund revenues and a nice breakdown there of what we estimated for revenue to come in. This estimate was formulated when we were putting together the governor's efficiency budget. So it's based upon the most recent RGGI auction at the time. And it breaks out the administrative costs related to RGGI that go to DES primarily, with a small component of that, I think about $12,000 actually staying with the PUC for administrative costs related to RGGI. Okay. In preparing this budget, we looked at every single item and every bit of revenue to determine whether it was truly necessary and developed a budget that met the target set by the governor. If you look at slide 12, you will see the comparison, and this relates to the efficiency budget as opposed to the House because we didn't have a budget at the House. You will see the adjusted authorized for 21 and then the efficiency request for 22 and 23. And you will see a significant increase in the energy efficiency fund piece, which relates to RGGI. I included in your packets the letter that I prepared for Representative Ober related to the RGGI funds and how that is a pass-through and does not actually impact the commission's budget. And so I hope that that was helpful for you on understanding the increase there. Our efficiency budget is $25,901,175 for fiscal year 22 and $26,307,610 for fiscal year 23, both of which are below their respective targets for the governor's phase. The commission identified 2 prioritized needs beyond its efficiency budget. If you take a look at slide 13 in your handouts, that speaks to the cybersecurity position. Cybersecurity is said to be one of the most significant threats to utilities at the current time. And a lot of the commissions across the country have already engaged a cybersecurity expert to help assist the commission in making sure the utilities are doing what they can do to protect against cyber attacks on utilities. And so this just gives you some data to support that request. The other request for prioritized needs relates to a vehicle for the safety division. As I said before, the safety division is comprised mainly of inspectors who go out to remote locations at times where utility infrastructure is located. And we are in need of an additional vehicle for those safety inspections. And I will pause here because that is the commission related part of the presentation. And so I could take questions now, or I could continue on to cover the site evaluation committee and then take questions on everything at the end. However, Mr. Chairman, you'd like to proceed.
Why don't we see if there are any questions thus far? So none. I do have one on the first couple of slides that you showed. For instance, the dockets opened. There were things like electric, natural gas, water, sewer, sustainable. What is sustainable?
Sustainable is a division at the commission that essentially deals mostly with renewable energy. And so a lot of the work that they do relates to the Renewable Energy Fund and grants and program work, but they also do participate in dockets and public comment hearings related to sustainable energy related topics.
Okay, so just as a follow-up to that, then under other, I wouldn't find any renewable energy things in under other.
Which slide are you? Oh, under other on dockets opened. No, if it's sustainable, it should be under sustainable.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no questions, please continue.
Okay, and if Commissioner Scott is on, I don't know if you can see if he is present, if you could promote him.
Robert Scott. Hey, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Senator.
Thank you. So I am also, just as a matter of statute, when you are the chairperson of the Public Utilities Commission, you are also automatically the chairperson of the Site Evaluation Committee. And Commissioner Scott is the statutory vice chair of the Site Evaluation Committee. And so that is part of the presentation today. The Site Evaluation Committee is administratively attached to the Public Utilities Commission, so it is an independent agency that is attached to the commission. RSA 162H provides that the committee can hire an administrator who is an unclassified state employee, or in the alternative, may be filled with an independent contractor. The committee has historically employed an administrator, and you will see in the budget that was a significant portion of the expenses for the committee. That position became vacant in September of 2020. And at the time, the hiring was frozen and so was not able to be filled. You will see that in the House phase, the governor had included funding from the general fund for that position, but that was removed as part of the amendment. During fiscal year 20, one project was filed at the Site Evaluation Committee. That was before my time that the filing happened, but it was a solar project called Chinook Solar LLC. It involved a 30 megawatt solar facility located in Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. The application fee for that project was $60,000. Since then, a petition for jurisdiction was filed. And that filing does not require a filing fee. The bulk of the other work done by the commission during the time that I apologize, by the committee during the time I've been there has been compliance work related to existing facilities. Since the efficiency budget that we put before the governor was prepared, we have learned that 2 additional filings are likely to be filed either at the very end of this fiscal year or at the beginning of the next fiscal year. One is a solar facility, and the other is not a certificate application, and I'm not sure of the details yet, but we do expect that at least 2 filings will be made in the relatively near future. The efficiency budget for the site evaluation committee is $286,000 and $286,015 for fiscal year 22 and $292,134 for fiscal year 23, both of which met the governor's targets. As I mentioned, the House amended the budget to unfund the administrator position, and we would ask that you restore that funding. Commissioner Scott, do you have anything to add?
I can get myself off mute. You'd think I'd learn, but after a year. Thank you, Senators. No, I just want to reiterate, if I could, the importance of that administrator position. Not only does it shepherd the work of the SEC when there's an active issue that they're addressing, it also acts as a conduit for potential developers coming in. They often have a lot of questions as they try to do their due diligence to decide whether they want to come in. And even beyond that, the statute envisions for existing projects, even if nobody is called up with concerns about a project or a complaint, it also envisions some form of ongoing compliance visits, and that would be the administrator's job. So I just want to, again, not to be too duplicative, but I just want to reiterate the need for that and the importance of that.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions on that part of the presentation? Seeing none, I guess we're prepared to go forward.
And I would add that Don Crease, the consumer advocate, is also present, and he is administratively attached as well. And so I would ask if for the remainder of the time he could present his budget to you.
What's that? What was the name again, Diane?
It's Don Crease, K-R-E-I-S.
I don't see him on right now.
Okay. Let me send him a message and see. All right, well, I've sent him a message, so hopefully he will join momentarily. I think we are ahead of schedule. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I could get off and call him.
Yeah, if you'd like to give him a call, that would be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, it's Diane Martin. I just wanted to update you. I did get Mr. Crease by text, and he is in an advisory board meeting and is attempting to leave that and join you. So I just wanted to update you that I got a hold of him so he knows that you're running ahead and waiting on him.
Thank you. Committee will be in recess for 5 minutes until the participant can join us.
Thank you.
Committee will please come back to order. Good afternoon, Mr. Crease.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Sure. Sorry to get you off from that other one.
Oh, well, I apologize, Senator, for being late. My advisory board, which meets quarterly and whose meetings I'm required by statute to attend, they were just wrapping up. And so I managed to get that over with in time to hopefully not keep you all waiting for too long.
Yeah, just blame it on us for being early.
Okay.
Okay. So you're recognized for your presentation.
Okay, there's my handsome face on your screen. I just wanted to take up a few minutes of your time to tell you that the Office of the Consumer Advocate is notable for not morphing at all, even if the plan to create a new Department of Energy is adopted, as I hope it will be. So we will remain the independent voice for the interests of residential utility customers at the Public Utilities Commission. And our budget request, as it's come through the governor's office and also through the House, and now onto you folks at Senate Finance, is pretty much a status quo proposition. We are continuing our small, scrappy status as an organization that has 4 professional staff people, including me, 2 attorneys, 2 analysts. We have a legal aide who sort of keeps the office running for us. And we do a lot with our relatively small budget request, in the sense that we represent the interests of residential utility customers, not just at the Public Utilities Commission, where we try to appear in all of the important dockets, but also regionally and federally. We are end user members of NEPOOL, which is the stakeholder advisory body to our regional grid operator, ISO New England. And we consider ourselves to be a leading voice in favor of ratepayer funded energy efficiency, which we think of as the best thing that we can deliver for residential customers. The development of a statewide utility customer data platform. We spearheaded the legislation authorizing that was adopted in 2019. And we are about, I think, to file a settlement agreement with the PUC, moving that project forward. Initiatives to modernize the grid, both on the electric and the natural gas side, the development of time of use rates, which we think are really important to advance the interests of residential utility customers who need to be flexible, empowered grid users. And we pride ourselves on being a reliable and neutral resource for all of you folks who serve in the general court. And to that end, I testify and talk with legislators all the time. And I try to call them as I see them, without regard to the other policy considerations and political considerations, frankly, that weigh on elected officials. And so I just wanted to say hello to all of you and make sure that I made myself available in case there are any questions about us or our budget. Of course, you know that we are entirely funded via utility assessment, so we don't impose any demands on the state's general fund. And therefore, I think our budget request is fairly non-controversial. And the scenery behind me is not the Office of the Consumer Advocate.
Thank you. Senator Hennessy has a question.
Thank you, Chairman Daniels. Are you no longer in need of information technology support? Just wondering why the House took out all of your transfers to the OIT.
Honestly, I think that was a mistake, that is my understanding, because we obviously do need support from the Department of Information Technology, like every other state agency does. And I think that will need to be corrected. Thank you for reminding me about that.
Further question? I see none. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me visit with you. I look forward to seeing you all again in person someday.
Okay, and were you the last one on the PUC presentation?
That's my understanding, sir.
Okay, well, I thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
With that, the committee will meet again tomorrow at 1 o'clock here in the chambers. And I will take a motion to adjourn. Senator Hennessy, seconded by Senator Gaida. Okay, can't hear you, Senator D'Alessandro.
Just to clarify his statement, the money that was withdrawn for OIT, he's asking that be reintroduced into his budget, and it's at no cost because he's funded by the assessment, and his statement was that it was just mistakenly withdrawn. Do we have any verification of that from the House?
I don't have any verification, but I think it's certainly a question we could ask the House.
Right, okay, thank you. Just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're calling roll to adjourn. Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes.
Senator Reagan is excused and the chair votes yes, and we will be adjourned. We'll see you tomorrow.